everybody, Noelia here. I keep forgetting that I should look at the camera. My husband says I should. I don't know how to do that. Anyways, I'm here from the Haliburton County Public Library, a community of making, back for part 2 of how to make a leather journal cover. We did it, and I really hope you stick around and watch because I'm going to show you how to cut the leather, how to dye it and or paint it, carve it, stitch it, all that good stuff. So stick around and watch. Time to pull out the leather roll. We're going to unroll it as best we can, and then we're going to rough out the size we need. It's really difficult to work with this leather when it's rolling up on you all the time, so I usually cut a rough piece so it's a little bit more manageable. Like I said in the last video, you can use a utility knife. I'm using this really nice sharp blade and a straight edge, and first I draw the lines with pencil to make sure I'm on the right track. Once I lose the template, and just use the knife. There's a lot of fiber going on, so you want to make sure you kind of score and go in the right direction when you're making your cuts. Scoring and going over them several times is a good idea so you don't get off track. Not gonna lie, this is all pretty hard on the hands. You really got to put in some good effort. Next step, we're roughing out and cutting the flaps. As you can see, I took some time to make sure and label the left and the right hand side, but little good it did me because, as you're going to see in a moment, I didn't quite get this part right.
Look what I did.
I cut them so that this rough side is facing up. I should have cut them this way.
Luckily, these flaps don't need to be exactly 3 inches, so we had some wiggle room, and I just cut off the edge that I had messed up and made sure to cut them in the right direction.
Don't worry about these. I will not be wasting them. I will make earrings and such out of all the offcuts. So we're just going to test it out. Be sure we're on the right track here.
That's going to go in there. This is going to go like so. That's going to get stitched down. This side's going to go over here. That's going to get stitched down. It's going to be able to close. It's all going to be together, obviously. This is going to go like so. And then we're going to be able to put a pin through there to lock it.
But now we've got to think about how to decorate, and I'm thinking that I want to go a little more colorful than that. Let's compare. This here was done with Cova color, which is more of an acrylic that sits on top of the leather, whereas this was done with a leather dye. I like both, but I think I want to go with more color for this. So when I'm thinking of designs, I like to keep a stash of previous templates. Look how organized it is.
I ended up scanning and copying the leather journal cover that's hiding underneath this book right now as a transfer.
So it's been a while since I've painted the leather, so I'm going to just do a couple of test strips. I'm going to go and get these wet. I'll be right. So I just got them wet enough that I can do a little transfer. Look, I didn't even wet the corner where my fingers were holding on. So here I've got my rough design that I'm going to imitate, and we'll just do a little patch piece here because the leather is wet, and I should probably wait for it to get back to almost the same color that it was. It'd be a good idea to use a pen that actually works, because then we could kind of see what we're getting. I'm going to do a test with these Cova colors, and These are all water-based. They act pretty much like acrylic paint. You can dilute it, and I'm just going to use a synthetic brush, nothing special.
So I just want to tell you about this Kova color. It's called Ecoflow Kova color. It's a water-based low VOC, which stands for volatile organic compounds, acrylic paint used for natural veg tan leather like we're using here. The colors are opaque when used in full strength, and they can be thinned with water like I said before.
I'm not too worried about this paint getting on my hands because it all really just did. Like, who does that? Like, right away I just got it all over my hands. That's how I paint, folks.
I'm going to show a test strip of is using Ecoflow Leather Dye, which is also a water-based low VOC product, but it kind of penetrates the leather more, and it just gives you a different effect. So you sort of just need to go and see what you prefer. So I'm just doing this so you can see the comparison of the dye and how it's applied versus the paint. And so you can see a little bit, one is a little more matte, this dye, and the Kova color is a little bit more, has more of a sheen. After painting them, I tested out the carving and how that will look, and I remembered that it's important to carve on a flat surface, so I was using these bumpy surfaces and they weren't giving me a great finish. So lesson learned. Now moving on to the finished product, I've got some tips to remember. Now it's time to lay out the pieces we're going to work with and mentally prepare for actually painting and carving the real deal. Holy moly, look how fast I am. It was not this fast in the slightest. Actually, just to let you know, I've sped up absolutely every last bit of this video. This took days and days and days, and it's funny to watch it this fast, because if only. So you get the best results painting sort of quickly. This dries pretty fast. And I found that I did actually prefer to paint on a dry piece of leather rather than the wet. Once everything's painted and I'm happy with it and it's nice and dry to the touch, I'm going to start carving. So I am using a tool called a Freehand stitching groover. This is my most favorite leather tool ever. It takes quite a lot of practice to know what angle to hold it on and to get your lines crisp and clear. Yeah, it takes some doing, and it's pretty hard on the hands too, so they're going to maybe cramp up a little bit. Finish the pieces off. I always use an edge beveler, which just does what it sounds like. It sort of cleans up your edges.
Like that.
Clean up time. Always clean your work surface.
We've got to glue down our pieces before making holes for stitching. This is Leather Craft Cement. It's a water-based product, and you put it wet on both pieces that you're going to glue together. Oh, getting it undone is going to be a problem.
See, I'm just laying down along the edges that I want glued together, and I'm trying not to go too far into the flap because we need our Coptic stitch journal or whatever sketchbook you're going to put in here to fit. So just enough that the edges stick together and we're just enough where our stitches are going to be, but try not to go any more than 1/8 of a quarter of an inch. I'm taping down my little tabs because they are not going to happily stay in place on their own. Then we're going to get a heavy board or weight, try to even it out and put it on there and let it sit for a little while till it's ready. Okay, it's time to start prepping for stitching. So we're pulling out our waxed thread. We're going to use a 2-needle technique. I'm going to pull out a couple more tools to be using. I decided against a couple of them, but this chisel, yes, very important. This is our diamond hole chisel, 3.9 millimeters, and it has 6 holes. These needles are blunt, which is why we are pre-stitching or pre-hole punching our holes. tool is a adjustable groover, and it's going to give us a nice clean line to follow. So you just put the groove where you want it and you tighten it, and then you can just roll right along the edge of the book. It helps to lift the book up like I did onto a board or something, and you just go all the way around and you've got an even space line where our holes are going to go next. Because the groover couldn't go across the little area where the tabs are, I'm just going to grab a straight edge and my other carving tool to just finish that line off. This next part gets loud and fun. So I'm going to start on one corner and work my way across. Every time I put the chisel down, I'm placing it in the last previous hole, so they stay lined up. You can measure out to make sure you're going to make it to the other edge of your book. Okay, I usually just eyeball it and wing it because that's how I like to do things, and it works out somehow amazingly. For our stitching, we're going to measure out 3 times the length of our book, and that's approximately how much we're going to need to double needle stitch this thing. And you thread your needles through each end of the thread that you just cut.
Like that.
You could just stitch this without any help, but I decided to try out the stitching pony or stitching horse, depending on what you call it. What I just did to prepare it is put down some leather so that cover rests in there nicely. So I've got that stitching pony in under my lap. You can kind of straddle it, and there's different ways to do it, but it really helps to just keep your work right at eye level where you need it. And okay, to start stitching, we're going to put our thread through, and then we're going to find the center of the thread so both sides are equal. And it's as easy as now, just one needle goes through one hole, pull to the other and pull it tight, then the other needle goes through the same hole in the other direction, and then pull tight. Now you're going to pull tight so many times like this that it is actually a really good idea to protect your fingers. I always end up slicing them up, as you'll see later in the video. And you're just going to follow along, going through one hole one direction, then the other needle goes through the same hole in the other direction. Now this is like the tightest stitch. This thing is not coming apart, folks. Okay, and then you just keep on doing this until you get to the last stitch, and at that point I'll let you know what we do.
Like that.
As you'll notice, I have some band-aids on my fingers now. Yeah, ow, ow, ow. And it's been hours and I'm still stitching. Yeah, just keep stitching away. Once you get to your last hole, you simply run the needles backwards through 2 or 3 holes, and that's enough to keep it in place. This thing is tight and not coming apart. And once you have gone back a few holes, you just snip off the ends of your thread, and you can tuck them in a little bit, but they really don't show up much.
Okay, folks, it's the moment of truth. We have our book stitched. Now there's lots of little dots and paint marks, and I could have been careful about that, but I kind of like that. I like there to be a little bit of a flaw, a little something that's imperfect about things. It's going to fit. Sometimes you have to work it a little because the glue might have gone a little further than I like in some spots. So I already kind of went in with my hand and worked it, and see if you lock. Et voila! Success. And clean up some spots if they need cleaning up. And just kind of carve away spots that need a little bit of work. And again, like I said, I personally am not a perfectionist when it comes to things. If it was really off, I would be concerned. But I think that's the beauty of handmade things, is there's always little bits that are not perfect. Who needs perfect? So next thing we're going to do, and this part's super fun, that always looks really good, we're going to take this out of there so that we can put a finish on the book.
So I'm going to be using Feeblings or Feebings brand. Or Fibings? I don't know. Anyways, protective acrylic finish for leather. In the past I've used a different brand and it was a little less shiny, which I prefer. But anyways, this is going to seep into the leather and keep it moistish and, you know, protect it.
Like that.
Always sign your work with love. Oh, final coat, and we're getting to the end. This was a really long labor of love. And guess what? It's going to last forever, so it is well worth the effort. You made it to the end of all of those videos. Well done. So just to recap, we made our Coptic stitch bound book in the first video, which you can link to below this one. Then we made our leather book cover. It has been a long process, but well worth the effort because it feels really good to do this. I hope you'll try some version of this at home. Hope you'll get in touch if you have any questions. And yeah, I hope you got inspired to learn how to do a little bit of leather work because it's